Hey guys! Imagine yourself standing in the shifting sands of an ancient desert, the horizon glowing with the deep amber of a setting sun. The wind is quiet, brushing against your face, carrying the dry scent of stone and time. Beneath your feet, the earth is brittle and hot, hiding secrets that have not seen the sky for thousands of years. Somewhere below lies a tomb, forgotten, buried, and sealed long ago with both care and fear. The story of cursed tombs has haunted human imagination for generations. From dusty legends whispered around oil lamps to sensational headlines that swept through modern newspapers in the early 20th century, the idea of disturbing the dead has always sparked something primal in us. A shiver. A hesitation. A flicker of awe. But what is the truth behind the so-called cursed tombs? What would really happen if you opened one? In this long, meandering journey, we'll explore the myths and realities behind these ancient resting places. We'll begin by immersing ourselves in the daily life of the workers who carved and sealed the tombs deep beneath Egypt's cliffs. Then, we'll follow the life of one of the most famous archaeologists ever to face a tomb's supposed curse. We'll drift through tales of strange illnesses and mysterious misfortunes, and we'll end with a look at how the tombs of the poor differed from those of the mighty. Through it all, the tone will remain calm. The pace will remain slow. And every detail is offered not to stir alarm, but to lull, soothe, and ease you into the rhythm of another world. So now, settle in a little deeper. Let us begin, not with pharaohs or grave robbers, but with the quiet lives of those who built the tombs, stone, by hand, beneath a burning sun. Imagine the warmth of early morning light creeping over the Lebanon cliffs, casting long, gentle shadows on stone. The sand crunches softly beneath your sandals as you rise with the others, the village already stirring with quiet movement. You live in Deir el-Medina, a humble yet orderly settlement on the edge of the western desert, separated from the bustling life of the Nile Valley. This is no ordinary village. Here, in rows of modest houses built of sun-dried mud brick, live the artisans, masons, and laborers who carved the tombs of Egypt's greatest kings. You are among them. The rhythm of your life is measured, not in days, but in stone. Each morning, after a shared meal of bread and beer, you and your fellow workers ascend into the valley, a place now known as the Valley of the Kings. The air is dry, the hills stark, but there is beauty in the emptiness. The colors of the rocks shift with the sun, from soft rose to ochre to bone white. You carry tools of bronze, linen sacks for pigment, chisels worn smooth from years of use. The work is exhausting but filled with purpose. The tombs are secret, sacred places, not merely burial chambers, but homes for the afterlife. Every wall you decorate, every corridor you dig, is done with care. You do not labor in isolation. Deir el-Medina is a structured society with scribes, foremen, and even a servant of the place of truth who manages daily work. On a small tablet of limestone, a piece called an ostracon, the scribe records your attendance. There are days of rest and festivals. There are grievances filed, petitions written. You are not forgotten, not invisible. Even here, in the distant past, the bureaucracy is alive and well. Life in Deir el-Medina is modest, but not grim. Your home is small but sufficient, perhaps 2 rooms, with a hearth and a rooftop where you sleep during hot summer nights. Water is carried in clay jars from a nearby well, and meals are prepared with lentils, onions, and figures. There is laughter at the communal oven, children weaving through narrow alleyways, and friends trading small goods. Beads, oil, scraps of linen. Still, the work you do carries weight. There is superstition and reverence, both whispered and understood. Many tombs are protected not just by stone, but by spells and warnings. Carefully inscribed curses, etched into walls and lintels, caution any who enter. I will seize the neck of he who disturbs my rest, one might read. Another promises the punishment of divine retribution, blindness, madness, disease. But you know, as do the others, that these threats are not for you. They are for thieves. You are a builder of sacred things, a keeper of the path to eternity. As the sun reaches its peak, you pause. Lunch is eaten in shade, flatbread and beer, the sustenance of your time. You speak in low voices, discussing the progress of the burial chamber or the complexity of a new ceiling motif. The heat is relentless, but the bond among you is strong. Years of shared labor have created a quiet unity. When the day ends, and you return to the village, the cliffs behind you seem taller, almost alive in the soft twilight. Fires are lit, and a warm, dusty wind sighs through the streets. You rest your body, but not your thoughts. Some evenings, the elders tell stories. Of kings and demons, of lost tombs and strange happenings. Perhaps you've heard tales of a tomb built so perfectly that its own magic turned against those who dared disturb it. Or a fellow worker who went mad after carving a particularly grim warning on a wall. You do not fear these stories. Not quite. But you listen carefully. And in the back of your mind, as you lie beneath a dark desert sky dotted with stars, you wonder, just a little, if those old words, those ancient threats carved in stone, were ever more than metaphor. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, the stone will call you again. Imagine yourself now not in the sands of ancient Thebes, but in the cool, book-filled study of a Victorian gentleman somewhere in England. The air is heavy with pipe smoke and parchment, the faint ticking of a mantel clock in the background. The year is sometime in the late 1800s, and a young boy, small and quiet, traces his fingers over the illustrations in a book about ancient Egypt. His name is Howard Carter. He is curious, focused, solitary. Born in 1874, Carter was the youngest child of a large family and not particularly robust in health. What he lacked in physical strength, however, he made up for in a meticulous, unshakable fascination with ancient worlds. Trained as an artist rather than an archaeologist, he began his career by sketching Egyptian artifacts and tomb decorations for others, his hand steady, his eye exacting. And yet, the rhythm of his life would change. By his early 20s, Carter found himself in Egypt, a foreign land of brilliant sun, vast sky, and buried kings. He worked under established archaeologists and gained a reputation for both skill and stubbornness. He was not always liked. But he was always thorough. Time passed. Excavations came and went. Carter climbed the ladder of Egyptology slowly, methodically, through heat and sand and scandal. He was not the grand adventurer of fiction, nor a dashing hero. He was a man of routine, a man of grit, a man who did not let go once he latched on. And what he latched onto, above all, was a single idea, that the tomb of the boy King Tutankhamun had never truly been found. Most experts at the time believed the Valley of the Kings had yielded all its secrets. Tomb robbers, floods, time, surely there was nothing left to uncover. But Carter believed otherwise. Backed by the quiet wealth of Lord Carnarvon, a British aristocrat with a taste for adventure, Carter spent years combing the valley. Digging. Surveying. Mapping. Season after season passed with little to show. The sun beat down. The sand shifted. Hopes dimmed. Then, in November of 1922, after nearly 2 decades of toil, they found something. It began with a step. Just a step. Hidden beneath the remains of ancient workers' huts was a staircase, descending into the bedrock. Carter had it cleared with care, his heart lightly pounding beneath his linen shirt. The stairs led to a sealed doorway. A cartouche, a royal name, was stamped into the plaster. Tutankhamun. The tomb was intact. What followed became legend. On November 26, Carter made a small breach in the second doorway. He held up a candle and peered inside. Behind him, Lord Carnarvon waited in suspense. "Can you see anything?" the Lord whispered. "Yes," Carter said, "wonderful things." Inside were treasures unimaginable: golden couches, statues, alabaster vases, chariots, and more. The air smelled old, thick with centuries of silence. The walls were still painted, the colors vibrant. And deeper still lay the king himself, untouched, his burial mask gleaming beneath layers of ritual wrapping. But even as the world marveled, something darker stirred. Within months of the tomb's opening, Lord Carnarvon fell ill. A mosquito bite became infected. He died in Cairo, his end painful and strange. At the moment of his death, it was said, the lights in the city flickered. His dog, far away in England, howled and collapsed. The newspapers erupted. "A mummy's curse," they said. The tomb was cursed. More deaths followed. Carter's friend, Sir Bruce Ingram, received a gift from the tomb, a mummified hand with a scarab bracelet. The bracelet, the story goes, bore a warning: "Cursed be he who moves my body. To him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." Ingram's house burned down. When he rebuilt, a flood destroyed it again. Other associates died in car crashes, from sudden fevers, from bizarre accidents. Of the 58 people present at the opening of the burial chamber, many suffered unusual fates. Or so it seemed. In truth, Carter himself lived until 1939. He was not felled by a curse but by lymphoma, a disease that progressed slowly. Many scholars have pointed out that of the dozens who entered the tomb, most lived long lives. But that did not stop the whispers. There was something eerie in the air, they said. Something that clung to those who disturbed the sleep of kings. Carter himself dismissed the idea of curses. He believed only in science, in artifacts, in preservation and discipline. Yet even he admitted, at times, to a certain unease. The tomb, he once said, had a presence. And there were strange things that happened. Electrical failures. Flickering lights. A cobra, symbol of the pharaoh, was found in Carter's home, having killed his pet canary shortly after the tomb's discovery. It was seen as an omen, a royal warning. Still, the work continued. The tomb took nearly 10 years to fully excavate, document, and clear. Carter oversaw each detail, recording and photographing every object, every wall, every scrap of linen. He was methodical to the end. And when the work was done, he faded into obscurity. No lectures, no parades. He died alone, largely forgotten by the public, who had moved on to newer legends, newer thrills. But his legacy endured. The tomb of Tutankhamun remains the most intact royal tomb ever found in Egypt. Its discovery reshaped archaeology. Its treasures now rest in museums, seen by millions. And its mystery endures. Whether or not the curse was real, whether the deaths were coincidence or consequence, one truth remains. Carter disturbed something that had lain untouched for over 3,000 years. And the world, ever since, has wondered what the price of the disturbance truly was. Imagine, once again, the warmth of desert stone beneath your feet. The same golden light falls across the Valley of the Kings, but now, in your mind's eye, shift forward in time. It is the 1920s. The world has become faster, louder, more curious. Cameras click. Reporters shout over the heat. And the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb has ignited a global storm. But beneath the excitement, a darker story unfolds, softly, steadily, like water seeping through stone. They called it a curse. Whispers began almost immediately. Lord Carnarvon, the tomb's financier, was dead only months after the discovery. The infection had spread quickly, absurdly, from a mosquito bite above his cheek. As he lay dying in a Cairo hotel, the power went out across the city. A coincidence, perhaps. And yet, in distant England, his dog, Susie, let out a strange, sudden cry and collapsed, lifeless. The newspapers took hold of the story with greedy hands. "The curse of the Pharaoh strikes," screamed the headlines. "Death comes to the tomb breachers." Mystery sold, and fear glittered behind every word. Soon, every cough, every accident, every broken watch among those who visited the tomb became part of the legend. But was it real? That is a more difficult question. Many of the deaths were indeed unusual. George J. Gould, a wealthy American who toured the tomb, died shortly afterward from a sudden fever. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy, another visitor, was shot by his wife. Arthur Mace, a key member of Carter's team, died of pleurisy. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, who x-rayed the mummy, fell ill and passed soon after. One by one, these men faded, many in pain, some with strange symptoms, others in accidents too odd to ignore. But consider this, death is not rare. It comes for everyone, eventually. And in the 1920s, disease moved swiftly and often without warning. Infections, strokes, heart failures, they arrived like storms in summer. The average life expectancy was lower than today. Antibiotics were not yet in wide use. And the stress of excavation, long hours, heat, and exposure surely wore down even the healthiest minds and bodies. Still, the notion of a mummy's curse persisted. Some scientists have tried to explain it. The tombs, they said, were sealed environments for millennia. Dark, damp, and undisturbed. Could toxic mold have developed on the wrappings? Aspergillus niger and Aspergillus flavus are fungi known to grow on decaying materials. Inhaled in sufficient quantities, their spores can cause serious respiratory illness, even death. Others pointed to bacteria, ancient strains that might have survived in low-oxygen environments. Still others considered gases, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and formaldehyde, released as ancient organic materials decayed in silence. But these are theories, not certainties. The curse, it seems, cannot be explained away entirely. Interestingly, a study conducted in the early 2000s by the British Medical Journal reviewed the lifespans of those involved in Tutankhamun's excavation. Their conclusion? There was no statistically significant difference between those who entered the tomb and those who did not. And yet, there is something haunting in the pattern. Not the curse itself, perhaps, but the idea of it. A slow dread. A vague disquiet. It is not so much about believing in magical punishment, it is about believing that there are some things we were not meant to disturb. When you look at the photos of the tomb's antechamber, its golden throne stacked beside footstools and chariots, untouched for 3,000 years, you feel it. That stillness. That silence. The heavy weight of time. The hush of the dead. Imagine breaking that silence. Imagine lifting the lid of a coffin sealed when Rome was not yet born. Imagine breathing in the stale air, pressing your fingers to the cold gold mask of a boy who was once called the living Horus, and seeing your own reflection staring back. That moment cannot be undone. Perhaps it's not a curse in the literal sense. Perhaps it is simply the echo of reverence. A recognition of boundaries. And a reminder that not all doors, once opened, lead only forward. Curses, after all, do not need to be magical to be powerful. Sometimes, the weight of history is enough. And yet, we return. Again and again, we open the tombs. Driven by curiosity, by awe, by the desire to understand. even knowing what might follow, even knowing the stories, even hearing the warnings whispered in dusty air. Let your mind drift back beyond the headlines, past the modern world and its flashbulbs and telegraphs. Imagine yourself once again in the hushed stillness of ancient Egypt, where the tombs lie deep beneath the desert hills, carved with care, sealed with reverence. Here, every surface tells a story. The stone walls are not bare. They breathe with meaning. Every inch is covered in words, meticulously chiseled hieroglyphs, painted in rich hues of red, yellow, and deep lapis blue. They are not merely decorations, but incantations, spells, protections, messages not for the living, but for the eternal, and sometimes for trespassers. Imagine stepping through a narrow passage, the light from your flickering torch catching the faint glint of ochre ink on limestone. The air is still, untouched for thousands of years. You pass an inscription and pause. It reads, "I am the one who drives off the enemy of Osiris. I shall seize the neck of him who enters this tomb uninvited." The tone is not merely poetic, it is precise, firm, legal, almost. These warnings were not uncommon in the tombs of Egypt's New Kingdom. While not all tombs contained explicit threats, enough did that the idea of a curse was woven deeply into the law surrounding these sacred places. But what did these spells actually mean? To understand them, we must first understand how the ancient Egyptians saw death. For them, death was not an end, it was a journey. The tomb was not a coffin, but a gateway. A resting place for the body, yes, but also a launch point for the soul's perilous voyage through the underworld. To reach the field of reeds, their eternal paradise, a soul needed protection. From serpents. From devouring beasts. From the trials of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. And just as the soul needed spells to survive that journey, the body needed defense from the world of the living. And so, the artisans of Deir el-Medina, the very ones we met earlier, painted and carved not only stories and prayers, but magical formulas designed to ward off intruders. Some were subtle, lines from the Book of the Dead, spells that would activate in the afterlife, calling upon gods to judge or avenge. Others were direct, threats to the violator. Consider one particularly sharp example, found near the tomb of a nobleman. "Any man who shall enter my tomb, impure, unclean, or with ill intention, shall be judged by the gods. His house shall fall, his name shall be erased, his children shall starve." This was not mere metaphor. The worst fate an Egyptian could suffer was to be forgotten, to lose one's name, to fade into silence. These curses didn't promise a haunting or a vengeful ghost. They promised obliteration. A spiritual execution, erasing a person from memory and from the afterlife. And this made them powerful. Yet we must be careful not to see these warnings through the lens of modern horror stories. The Egyptians were not creating booby traps or haunted tombs in the Hollywood sense. Rather, they believed deeply in the power of language, the power of words to influence the cosmos. In Egyptian belief, to speak something was to give it power. To write it was to give it permanence. Thus, a curse carved in stone was more than a threat. It was a shield. The tomb's entrance, often sealed with magical bricks and amulets, might also be aligned with specific stars or protected by guardian statues. These weren't simply religious gestures, they were considered practical defenses. In many cases, magical bricks, small clay blocks inscribed with protective spells, were buried at the 4 cardinal points of the tomb. Each bore an incantation. One might call upon the god Anubis to drive back the desert serpent. Another might implore Isis to bind the mouths of evil speech. Some tombs contained guardian figures, small statues of gods, or hybrid creatures with the heads of jackals or lions. Their role? to watch, to guard, to intervene. Even the placement of furniture and objects inside the tomb was thought to create spiritual harmony, a balance that, if disturbed, could lead to misfortune. And while these rituals were ancient, their impact was lasting. When modern archaeologists entered these tombs, they were sometimes struck by the force of the warnings they saw. Some laughed. Some grew uneasy. And some, later, would wonder. After all, the Egyptians believed that spells could lie dormant for millennia, waiting only for the right conditions to awaken. One breath. One footprint. One spoken name. Then, activated. Of course, modern science offers different explanations. The curse is said to be a combination of natural hazards, mold, gas, paranoia, coincidence. But the presence of these spells remains undeniable. Even now, when you stand before a tomb wall and trace the lines with your eyes, you feel something. Not fear. But weight. A heaviness of meaning. A density of belief. The quiet certainty that the people who carved these spells believed in them fully. And in a world where faith shaped stone and magic mingled with dust, that belief was a kind of power. So perhaps the tombs were cursed, not by malice, but by memory. By the lingering force of a culture that did not divide life from death, the sacred from the practical. And perhaps, just perhaps, the act of opening such a tomb is not dangerous because of what it unleashes, but because of what it disturbs. A stillness. A silence. A sacred equilibrium. The question is not whether the curse is real. The question is, how much stillness can we break before we, too, are changed? As you settle more deeply into stillness, perhaps your breathing soft and slow, allow your thoughts to drift toward the flickering gaslight of 19th century London. The streets are damp and dim, horse hooves clattering over cobblestone. Inside bookshops and drawing rooms, a new fascination is spreading, not with the modern world, but with the mysteries of the past. Egyptomania has arrived. Fueled by Napoleon's expedition to Egypt and the subsequent publication of detailed sketches and translations, European curiosity about the ancient Nile blossomed into obsession. The British Museum and the Louvre began acquiring sarcophagi and statues. Newspapers printed breathless accounts of desert adventures. And in the midst of this cultural hunger, a new figure emerged, the cursed mummy. It was not archaeologists who first popularized the idea of tomb curses, it was fiction writers. The earliest stories painted mummies not as passive remains but as powerful revenants, returned to punish those who disturbed their slumber. One of the first such tales was The Mummy, by Jane Seal Loudon, published in 1827. In this strange, imaginative novel, the mummy of Pharaoh Cheops is resurrected, not through horror, but as a philosophical and political voice. But it was in short stories, penny dreadfuls, and serialized tales that the darker vision took hold. Writers such as Louisa May Alcott, yes, the same author known for Little Women, penned eerie tales like Lost in a Pyramid, or The Mummy's Curse, 1869, where a flower taken from a mummy's tomb brings death and madness. H. Rider Haggard, Arthur Conan Doyle, and Bram Stoker followed, mixing desert mystique with Victorian fear, blending the unknown with the supernatural. The mummy became a metaphor. It was not just a relic, it was a warning. A presence from a culture more ancient than any European empire, one that could not be fully understood or controlled. To disturb it was to invite retribution. And then, cinema arrived. The flickering silver screen brought the curse into new focus. In 1932, Universal Pictures released The Mummy, starring Boris Karloff. With his sunken eyes and slow, deliberate movements, Karloff's Imhotep was no mere monster. He was mournful, tragic, a being driven by lost love and centuries of burial. The film's atmosphere was thick with shadows and silence. Hieroglyphs glowed in torchlight. Ancient scrolls promised both resurrection and doom. The story was fiction, but the emotions it stirred were real. Over time, other films followed, each more dramatic than the last. The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, 1964, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb, 1971, and of course, the more modern The Mummy series of the late 1990s and early 2000s. These movies, filled with traps, plagues, and magical vengeance, carried the curse from pulp horror to blockbuster. Yet beneath the spectacle, a thread remained, the ancient warning, "Do not disturb the dead." These tales fed on something deeper than fear. They fed on guilt. On the uneasy knowledge that the treasures displayed in Western museums were taken from graves. That the gold and jewels were once offerings, not ornaments. That the bodies were not exhibits, but people. And so, the curse transformed. From a supernatural punishment into a kind of symbolic reckoning, a reminder that colonialism, too, carries consequences. Even today, the mummy remains a staple of horror, though now often reimagined. In some versions, it is a guardian. In others, a victim. But always, it is tied to the past, buried, forgotten, and unearthed too soon. Beyond film, the curse has entered television, comics, video games, and children's books. The motif appears in everything from Scooby-Doo to Doctor Who, from board games to Halloween decorations. The once sacred image of the shrouded dead has been transformed, sometimes comically, sometimes reverently, but always with a trace of that original awe. Yet, even in our playful modern retellings, the core question remains. What happens when we open something that was meant to stay closed? Perhaps, in a way, the curse has fulfilled its purpose, not by harming those who enter the tombs, but by embedding itself in our collective memory. A whisper. A suggestion. A soft, persistent reminder that there are some thresholds we cross only at great cost. So next time you see a mummy in a museum case, or a film where ancient sandstorms rise in vengeance, listen closely. Behind the special effects and painted masks, you might still hear the faint echo of a voice carved in stone. I guard this tomb. Disturb it not. Not a scream. Not a roar. But a whisper. A warning. As quiet as the desert wind. Let the imagined world of cinema and legend fade gently into the background now. Allow yourself to return once more to a place of quiet dust and measured footsteps. No longer accompanied by music or special effects, but by the rustle of paper, the click of a camera shutter, the careful brush of a gloved hand against ancient stone. This is not the world of curses or treasure hunting. This is the world of archaeology. In the modern era, the opening of a tomb is a process governed by precision, preparation, and profound respect. It is a slow unfolding, not a dramatic unveiling. No longer does a lone adventurer chip through the stone with a crowbar under moonlight. Today, it is a collaborative effort, multidisciplinary, deeply regulated, and increasingly mindful of cultural heritage. Imagine a team arriving at a newly uncovered site. It begins not with digging, but with documentation. Researchers consult satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and historical records. The area is surveyed and mapped. Permits are obtained through the appropriate authorities, often the Ministry of Antiquities or equivalent cultural heritage body in the host country. Teams may wait months, sometimes years, before even setting foot on the site. And when they do, they tread lightly. Every step is deliberate. The excavation begins with soft tools, brushes, trowels, and small wooden picks. Layers of earth are carefully removed. Artifacts are not pulled from the ground, but coaxed free. Soil samples are collected and catalogued. Every object is photographed in situ before being moved, and every find is logged with exact coordinates, depth, and orientation. It is, in many ways, more like surgery than exploration. And should the tomb entrance itself be discovered, a sealed doorway, a carved lintel, or even a shaft leading downward, the process slows further. Imagine a rectangular opening, partially blocked by fallen stones. The light is dim, and the air is still. The team waits, tests the atmosphere for toxins. Instruments measure humidity, temperature, oxygen levels. In some cases, small robotic cameras are inserted first, slipping through cracks to photograph what lies beyond. If it is determined safe, the door is opened, but not breached. A conservation specialist enters first, followed by a small team trained in preservation. They assess the condition of the interior, painted walls, wooden beams, clay vessels. Environmental controls may be brought in to stabilize temperature and humidity, protecting the space from sudden change. Every inch is documented, photographed from multiple angles, scanned with laser mapping tools, and measured in three-dimensional modeling systems. Objects are not moved until their relationship to the surrounding space is fully understood. And when items are finally removed, it is with immense care. Each fragment is placed in protective material. Organic remains, textiles, wood, human bone, are especially fragile after millennia underground. Conservators work on site to treat them immediately, applying stabilizing chemicals or humidity control to prevent disintegration. Modern archaeologists are not treasure hunters. Their role is not simply to discover, but to interpret, preserve, and communicate. Increasingly, tombs are not emptied. Many are left intact, studied through digital scanning rather than physical removal. Museums and universities around the world are adopting a new philosophy. The tomb is not a warehouse of artifacts, but a cultural whole, a context that must remain coherent. And where remains are involved, mummies, bones, funerary goods, the protocols grow more complex still. Consultation with local communities is now considered essential. In Egypt, for example, there is growing emphasis on Egyptian-led excavations, and on keeping artifacts within the country rather than exporting them abroad. Repatriation of stolen or displaced objects has become a central issue in heritage debates. The curse may no longer be feared, but the ethical weight of disturbing the dead has never been heavier. Imagine standing at the threshold of a chamber sealed for 3,000 years. The air is warm, slightly musty, tinged with mineral and resin. A cartouche is visible above the doorway, perhaps naming a nobleman or a forgotten scribe. You feel not fear, but reverence. The moment is quiet. The light dim. You are not an intruder. You are a guest. And like any good guest, you enter with permission, with humility, and with care. Today's archaeologists speak not of discovery, but of stewardship. Their mission is not to claim the past, but to learn from it, to preserve it, to ensure it survives another 1,000 years. Because the tomb, once opened, changes forever. Not because of a curse, but because silence, once broken, cannot be restored. So now, close your eyes a little more if you wish. Let yourself imagine the slow, methodical uncovering of a painted wall. A hand brushing away grains of sand. A gloved finger tracing the outline of a symbol drawn by a man long dead. A scribe's plea for eternal life, written not for us, but for the gods. We read it, not with ownership, but with awe. And the tomb, though opened, still holds its mysteries. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in the middle of a vast desert plain. The sun has slipped below the horizon, and the wind picks gently across the dunes, brushing ancient grains of sand against your ankles. All around you, the earth is still. There is no sound, no engine, no voice, no hum of machinery. Just sand, stars, and silence. And beneath your feet, several meters below, might lie a tomb no human has seen in thousands of years. The truth is, for every tomb that has been opened and catalogued, there are countless more that remain untouched. Some are lost to history, forgotten even in ancient times. Others are suspected but not yet located. And many, buried beneath shifting sands or modern construction, may never be found at all. This thought alone is enough to inspire a sense of quiet wonder. Let's begin in the Valley of the Kings. Of the estimated 64 known tombs carved into that rocky desert basin, only a portion have been fully excavated. Some are small and incomplete, but others, like KV62, the tomb of Tutankhamun, have revealed extraordinary riches. And yet, archaeologists believe that at least one royal tomb still remains unfound, possibly hidden under rubble or built atop older burial grounds. There is strong speculation that the tomb of Queen Nefertiti, the enigmatic wife of Akhenaten, has yet to be discovered. Some researchers theorize it may lie adjacent to, or even within, the same complex as Tutankhamun's tomb. Ground-penetrating radar scans have suggested anomalies, chambers behind sealed walls, but no excavation has confirmed these leads, and out of respect for the site's delicate condition, most have chosen caution over intrusion. It's not only Nefertiti. Pharaohs like Thutmose II and other members of the 18th dynasty are still unaccounted for. Their names appear in ancient texts, on temple walls, and on funerary objects, but their final resting places are missing. And so we are left with the possibility that somewhere under the valley, behind a collapsed tunnel, beneath a forgotten cliff face, still lies a royal tomb, sealed and waiting. Now, let your mind drift away from Egypt for a moment. Travel with your imagination to China, where the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, has been partially uncovered. You might be familiar with the famous terracotta army, thousands of life-sized soldiers buried to guard the emperor in the afterlife. But the main tomb chamber itself remains untouched. Why? Because the ancient texts speak of rivers of mercury and intricate mechanical traps. Modern scans suggest the tomb mound contains high levels of mercury vapor. Out of concern for the health of archaeologists, and the preservation of what may lie inside, Chinese officials have delayed full excavation. It is one of the most significant unopened tombs in the world. And closer to home, in the Americas, vast burial complexes of the Maya and Inca remain hidden beneath thick jungles. In some cases, modern LiDAR technology has revealed enormous cities and ceremonial sites, previously invisible beneath the canopy. It's likely that the tombs of powerful rulers, kings, priests, warriors, still lie untouched within these forgotten cities, protected by roots, vines, and time. But sometimes, tombs are not found because they were meant never to be. Some were intentionally hidden to protect them from looting. Others were sealed during times of turmoil, civil wars, invasions, religious upheavals, and their locations erased from memory. In these cases, even the ancients forgot where they buried their own dead. And yet, the earth remembers. Imagine, beneath the floor of an old village house in the Nile Delta, lies a limestone shaft, filled with sand and gravel, leading down into the darkness. Or under a modern street in Luxor, a sealed doorway is buried under layers of rubble, shops, and traffic. These possibilities are not fantasy, they are real and documented. In 2020, for instance, archaeologists in Egypt unearthed a series of sealed coffins in the Saqqara necropolis. The site had been used for millennia, yet parts of it remained completely untouched, waiting quietly beneath the surface. Dozens of colorful wooden coffins, perfectly preserved, were found stacked in layers, their contents undisturbed since burial. What might still lie beyond those boundaries? The more we discover, the more we realize how much remains hidden. And so, in a very real sense, the world remains a map half-drawn. Even as satellites scan the globe, even as archaeologists comb through deserts, forests, and mountains with cutting-edge technology, many tombs continue to lie in peace, unknown to the modern world. They are not just chambers of stone and bones. They are whispers of memory. Stories waiting patiently beneath our feet. As you close your eyes and breathe a little deeper, imagine all those unopened tombs. Not as places of fear, but as pockets of history, tucked gently into the folds of the earth, untouched by time. They are not forgotten. They are merely sleeping. And perhaps, one day, when the moment is right, we will meet them with open hands and reverent hearts. Until then, they remain part of the earth's quiet dreams, beneath the sand, beneath the stone, beneath the centuries. As you rest a little deeper, and your breath grows slow and even, imagine yourself holding a dim oil lamp, its flickering flame dancing against the walls of a narrow stone corridor. You're walking through the dark, carved belly of an ancient tomb. The air is thick and still, untouched for thousands of years. And somewhere ahead, perhaps, hidden beyond the next bend or chamber, lies something not meant to be found easily. Throughout the centuries, stories have circulated about the traps and protections ancient builders designed to guard the dead. From collapsing passageways to curses etched in stone, the concept of tomb defenses has sparked imaginations both in archaeology and fiction. But how much of it is real? Let us begin with the most legendary example, Egypt. The ancient Egyptians believed in the afterlife as a continuation of life itself. For royalty and nobles, the tomb wasn't just a grave, it was a home, a portal, and a treasure vault. Protecting it was of paramount importance. Despite popular myths, ancient Egyptian tombs rarely included mechanical traps like swinging blades or poison darts. There's no verified record of an actual booby trap being triggered in an Egyptian tomb. But that doesn't mean they didn't try to protect their dead. In the Valley of the Kings, architects created long, winding corridors, sudden drop-offs, and false chambers, all designed to confuse and deter robbers. Some passages would lead nowhere. Others were sealed with enormous blocks of stone, requiring immense effort to breach. There were also clever techniques like burial chambers set at the bottom of vertical shafts, with no obvious access once sealed. Some tombs were intentionally filled with debris and rubble to hide the true burial chamber. Others were painted with curses and warnings, not so much to trigger supernatural wrath, but perhaps to prey on the psychological fear of potential robbers. One famous inscription, found in a tomb from Egypt's Middle Kingdom, read, "Cursed be those who disturb the rest of the pharaoh. They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by a disease that no doctor can diagnose." Is it a curse? A warning? Or just a form of ancient deterrence? Perhaps all three. Elsewhere in the ancient world, the approach to tomb protection varied greatly. Let's travel east to China again, to the incredible mausoleum of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. As mentioned earlier, ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing through his tomb. Recent scientific surveys have found high concentrations of mercury in the soil above the central chamber. Whether these rivers were real or symbolic, the presence of mercury could be both toxic and symbolic, a deterrent to any intruder. Some believe that early Chinese engineers may have even constructed mechanical traps, crossbow mechanisms, tripwires, or falling stones. While these have not been confirmed due to the tomb's unopened status, records from the records of the grand historian speak of deadly deterrents crafted for the emperor's eternal protection. Closer to the Mediterranean, in ancient Mycenae and Anatolia, tomb builders used massive stone doors and chambers sealed behind hidden entrances. In some Mycenaean tombs, archaeologists have discovered corridors deliberately blocked with rubble and false doorways. A method to confuse and delay tomb robbers, who often worked in secret and under pressure. And in ancient Persia, the royal tombs at Naqshi Rustam were cut high into cliffs, with no stairways or ground-level entrances. This inaccessibility was a form of protection in itself. Only those with climbing equipment or elaborate planning could hope to reach the sealed chambers. Further west, in the Roman world, tomb protection was less about traps and more about location and inscriptions. Romans were known to curse tomb violators through inscriptions etched into stone, warning of divine retribution or legal penalties. One sarcophagus inscription from the 2nd century CE warns, "If anyone disturbs this tomb, may they die cursed, and may their bones be scattered without a grave." Even in the medieval world, the idea of tomb protection endured. The burial sites of saints and kings were often guarded in cathedrals or castles, watched over by clergy or protected through secrecy. Some legends speak of treasure chests hidden in monasteries, guarded not by traps, but by riddles and divine warning. And of course, we can't ignore the imagination. Popular fiction has often run wild with the idea of ancient tomb traps, sliding walls, poison needles, collapsing ceilings. While rarely based on verified history, these ideas are rooted in the very real fear people once had of disturbing the dead. The deeper truth is that the real trap was often psychological, the belief that to steal from the dead was to invite misfortune. Still, we must not discount the ingenuity of ancient engineers. Where physical traps were rare, deception was common. In Egypt, stone-cutting techniques allowed them to carve secret chambers and disguise scenes so perfectly that even modern-day archaeologists have difficulty identifying them. In some cases, tombs were constructed with escape routes for priests or workers, so they could seal the chamber from within and still get out through narrow shafts. These architectural decisions sometimes led to mysterious hidden passages being discovered centuries later. So as you rest now, and your thoughts wander deeper into the folds of history, consider this: ancient traps weren't always the dramatic snares of legend. They were clever, subtle, psychological, and sometimes symbolic. They whispered warnings rather than roared threats. They invited caution rather than violence. And they leave us today with the question: what was real and what was fear? Close your eyes now and imagine the silence of those ancient corridors. The cool touch of stone. The gentle flicker of a torch. You walk with care, not because of traps, but because of reverence. Because the dead, in every age, deserve to be left undisturbed. And we, the living, walk only as visitors. Quietly. Gently. In awe of the mysteries sealed within stone. As you ease further into the gentle rhythm of rest, your breathing calm and your mind light as a feather drifting through time, we now open a quiet chapter in the shadowed history of tombs, one that speaks not of kings or rituals, but of those who entered not in reverence, but in secrecy. Those who came in the quiet of night, seeking treasure, not eternity. We turn now to the tomb robbers. Far from the dramatized villains of stories, tomb robbers were often products of their time, men, and sometimes even women, driven not merely by greed, but by desperation, necessity, and the slow erosion of fear. In ancient Egypt, tomb robbery was such a frequent occurrence that it was written about in official records, investigated by special agents, and prosecuted in courts. Even during the time of the pharaohs, officials knew the problem existed. In fact, many of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings were robbed within mere decades, or even years, of being sealed. But who were these robbers? They were often ordinary workers, stonemasons, guards, or laborers who had helped construct the very tombs they would later violate. Who better to know where the false walls were, or how to bypass a sealed door, than those who had built them? They lived in cramped homes in workers' villages like Deir el-Medina, under the hot Egyptian sun. Life was not easy, and the tombs nearby whispered of golden masks, jeweled collars, and vases filled with precious oils. Temptation was constant. And in a time of famine or political upheaval, the promise of wealth behind a few blocks of limestone may have seemed like salvation. Egyptian tomb robbers left traces behind, some physical, some textual. One famous document from the 20th dynasty, now known as the Abbot Papyrus, records a formal investigation into the robbery of royal tombs. It details the names of suspects, the accusations, and even their confessions. In one case, a robber admitted to tunneling into a noble's tomb, breaking open the sarcophagus, and stealing golden amulets and inlays. They did not find the wrath of gods, but rather the hard justice of men. Punishments were severe. Some robbers were beaten, mutilated, or even executed. But others slipped through unnoticed, perhaps aided by bribed officials or working under the protection of corrupt overseers. Tomb robbery, in many ways, became an industry. Looted objects flowed into markets and found their way to merchants, temples, and, centuries later, to the cabinets of European collectors. This pattern was not unique to Egypt. In ancient Greece, tombs of warriors and aristocrats were often looted for their bronze weapons and jewelry. Though the Greeks believed in honoring the dead, the chaos of wars and internal strife sometimes led to widespread pillaging of burial sites. In Rome, grave robbing was both a crime and a common practice. Especially during periods of civil war and economic downturn. Roman law, particularly the Lex Cornelia de Sepulchris Violates, imposed harsh penalties for disturbing tombs. Yet the crime persisted. Not always for gold, but sometimes for lead tablets inscribed with magical curses, or exotic imported artifacts buried with the deceased. In the Middle Ages, as ancient sites fell into ruin, treasure hunters emerged. Some believed old tombs held the riches of long-lost kings. Others were drawn by legends or whispers of cursed gold. Monks in medieval Europe sometimes recorded instances of peasants entering old barrows or crypts, seeking silver chalices or ancient swords. At times, these acts were treated with horror. At others, with a strange sort of pragmatism. After all, bones and objects buried long ago, by unknown peoples, felt less sacred to those who no longer remembered their names. In Mesoamerica, tomb looting was also present. After the fall of the great Maya cities, local populations and outsiders would seek valuables left in royal burials, jade, obsidian, or golden artifacts. Even today, archaeologists encounter sites that were looted long before they ever arrived, some disturbed a century ago, some millennia. And yet, not all tomb robbers were nameless thieves in the dark. Some were soldiers, ordered to seize wealth during conquests. Others were early antiquarians, men who fancied themselves scholars, but removed grave goods without context or care. Still others were locals who, amid poverty and hardship, did what they felt they must. Even in modern times, tomb robbing continues. Black market antiquities fuel a global trade in artifacts, and some of the world's most famous museum pieces may have once passed through the hands of an unrecorded tomb robber. But while the stories of the robbers are tinged with tragedy and violation, they also serve as a strange mirror to our own curiosity. After all, to enter a tomb, even to steal, is to believe that something of value has been left behind. Something that transcends time. In some sense, it's a search for meaning, albeit misdirected. As you rest now, in the quiet of night, think not of the crime itself, but of the lives behind it. The desperate father. The exploited laborer. The opportunistic merchant. Each one part of a shadowy thread in the long tapestry of history. And though the tombs were violated, their stories endure. Their architecture speaks. Their inscriptions remain. And their stolen treasures, once scattered, now slowly return home, piece by piece, as museums, archaeologists, and nations attempt to restore what was lost. So sleep now, not with judgment, but with reflection. For history is not always clean. It is layered, broken, stolen, and repaired. And even in its darkest corners, there is always something to learn. As the hours pass gently, and your breath slows in rhythm with the soft tick of time, we drift now into a curious and often misunderstood realm, the world of tomb curses. Mysterious deaths, whispered omens, and the chilling question, did cursed tombs really kill people? It is a question that has sparked fear, fascination, and folklore for centuries. But like the silent statues that line the corridors of ancient burial chambers, the truth waits quietly in the shadows, ready to reveal itself to those who listen with calm curiosity. Let us begin with the most famous tomb of all, that of Tutankhamun. When the young pharaoh's tomb was discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter, the world was enchanted. The golden mask, the chariots, the amulets, all lay untouched for over 3,000 years. But soon after, a strange series of events began to unfold. Just a few months after entering the tomb, Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy patron who had funded the excavation, died unexpectedly in Cairo. A mosquito bite on his cheek became infected, and he succumbed to blood poisoning and pneumonia. The lights in Cairo reportedly flickered at the moment of his death. Back in England, his dog howled and collapsed. The press, always hungry for drama, declared it the beginning of a curse. More deaths followed. Some real, some exaggerated. An archaeologist here, a relative there. People began to whisper that Tutankhamun's tomb was protected by a supernatural force. A curse of the pharaohs. But as historians and scientists began to study the matter more closely, a calmer picture began to emerge. In truth, many of those involved in the tomb's discovery lived long, healthy lives. Howard Carter himself lived for another 17 years. Most of his team survived into old age. The idea of a deadly curse began to crumble under scrutiny. So what, then, could explain the scattered deaths? One answer lies not in magic, but in microbiology. Ancient tombs, especially those sealed tightly for millennia, can become breeding grounds for mold, bacteria, and toxic gases. Some researchers have proposed that spores of Aspergillus flavus, a type of fungus found on ancient walls and organic materials, could release toxins harmful to the lungs and immune system. Inhalation might cause severe allergic reactions or even death in individuals with weakened health. Similarly, certain bacteria, such as Staphylococcus or Pseudomonas, could survive on wrappings, linens, or within the tomb's humid microclimate. Combined with dust, droppings, and poor ventilation, the air inside could be surprisingly hazardous. Others point to long exposure to formaldehyde, ammonia, or hydrogen sulfide, chemicals that may have built up in tombs due to decomposition and ancient embalming processes. These gases, while not always deadly, could cause dizziness, respiratory issues, or fainting spells, especially for explorers unprepared for what lay inside. So while the curse may not have been real in a supernatural sense, the danger, though rare, may have had a scientific basis. But the power of belief should not be underestimated. In some cultures, the idea of disturbing the dead carried heavy psychological weight. Workers, particularly locals, may have grown up hearing stories of angry spirits and divine retribution. Entering a tomb with such fear in one's heart could heighten stress, worsen illness, or even cause death by anxiety or misfortune. In psychological terms, this is known as the nocebo effect, the opposite of a placebo. It is the idea that negative expectations can cause real physical symptoms. Imagine a guard stationed outside a tomb. He hears rumors of a curse. His friend falls ill. Then he coughs one day. His fear spirals. He stops eating. His body weakens. And eventually, he dies, not from a curse, but from belief in one. Tomb curses were not unique to Egypt, either. In ancient Mesopotamia, inscriptions sometimes warned intruders of divine punishment. A royal tomb might be protected by a clay tablet declaring, "May the gods strike down those who defile this grave." In parts of Asia, particularly China and Korea, elaborate protective texts were inscribed on tomb walls to ward off evil and warn looters. Some included invocations of thunder gods or ancestral spirits. In Europe, especially during the medieval period, tombs of saints and monarchs might be sealed with holy symbols or relics meant not just for honor but protection. The desecration of such sites was believed to invite bad luck, disease, or divine wrath. And yet, for all these stories, no consistent pattern of fatal curses has ever been scientifically proven. What remains instead is something quieter, more complex, a blend of real hazards, human psychology, and the human desire for stories that explain the unexplained. The tomb, after all, is a powerful symbol. It is a gateway between worlds. A place where the living and the dead come closest. It is little wonder that it should attract superstition. As you continue resting now, imagine those ancient corridors. Dust in the beams of a flickering torch. Gold glinting faintly in the darkness. The silence so deep you can hear your own breath. And in that silence, there is no anger. No curse. Only time. Stone by stone, layer by layer, the myth of the curse dissolves. What remains is the deeper mystery, the respect ancient people had for their dead, the care with which they protected their memory, and the quiet warning to tread lightly in the realm of those who came before. So sleep gently now, with the knowledge that the past holds no curse for you, only stories. Some true. Some imagined. All part of the great, endless dream of history. Let us continue drifting deeper through the sands of time, as the candles of memory flicker and fade gently in the background. We now turn our gaze to the ingenious and sometimes devious strategies used by ancient tomb builders to protect their most sacred spaces. Not with curses or magic, but with craft, calculation, and clever deception. Throughout the ancient world, the fear of tomb robbery was very real. It was not just about treasure, though there was plenty of that to tempt even the most hesitant thief. It was about honor. About legacy. About ensuring that the soul of the departed could rest undisturbed for eternity. The Egyptians, as always, offer some of the most fascinating examples. The builders of royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings knew full well that time would eventually expose even the most hidden burial sites. And so, they turned to illusion, confusion, and deterrence. Many tombs were constructed with false doors, perfectly carved entrances that led nowhere. A thief might waste hours chiseling away at solid rock, only to be met with a blank wall behind a convincing frame. Others included decoy corridors that wound off into dead ends. By the time a robber realized the mistake, they had lost precious time, made noise, and risked alerting guards, or worse, triggered a hidden trap. Some tombs were sealed not once, but multiple times. Layers of plaster, bricks, and rubble would block passageways, making the intrusion so labor-intensive that it wasn't worth the risk. There were even architectural tricks designed to mislead the eye. Sloping floors that suggested the tomb went deeper when it actually veered sideways. Passages that narrowed deliberately to confuse depth perception. One particularly brilliant method was the use of hidden chambers. The real burial room might be completely concealed behind a slab of stone or hidden within an alcove indistinguishable from the surrounding wall. To the untrained eye, or a hurried thief, it looked like the tomb ended much sooner than it did. These were not simple tricks. They were planned from the very beginning, often during the reign of the king who commissioned the tomb. Builders were sworn to secrecy, their lives dedicated to protecting the eternal slumber of the divine ruler. In some cases, tombs were designed to collapse on intruders. Large stones might be balanced above passageways, ready to fall if a beam was removed. While less common than in Hollywood films, booby traps did exist in certain cultures, particularly in China, where crossbow traps were sometimes rigged to fire at intruders. The tomb of the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, is perhaps the most dramatic example. According to ancient texts, it was surrounded by rivers of mercury and armed with mechanical devices designed to harm any who dared disturb it. While many of these details remain unconfirmed, the fact that the tomb remains sealed to this day speaks to the lingering caution such defenses inspire. Further west, in the realm of the Etruscans and later the Romans, deception took different forms. Tombs might be disguised as simple huts or family homes. In places like Cerveteri, vast necropolises resembled small cities, each tomb a house for the dead. Finding a single buried treasure among thousands of stone homes was like searching for a needle in a timeless haystack. Even in medieval Europe, tomb builders showed ingenuity. Crypts were buried beneath layers of stone, often with misleading inscriptions. The real bodies were buried deep below, with only a decoy sarcophagus above. It was not just protection from robbers, but from political enemies or religious desecration. In many cultures, tombs were surrounded by guardians, not traps, but symbols. Statues of lions, serpents, or fearsome warriors warned visitors that the tomb was not to be disturbed. Whether or not one believed they would come to life was beside the point. The message was clear. But perhaps the most powerful deterrent was the unknown. Imagine entering a dark chamber, torchlight flickering on walls covered in strange symbols. You don't know if those glyphs are prayers or threats. You don't know if a step forward might trigger something you can't see. You don't even know if someone is watching you, alive or otherwise. In that moment, even the bravest thief might turn back. This was the brilliance of ancient tomb builders. They understood not only engineering and stonework, but human psychology. They knew that fear, confusion, and time were their greatest allies. And yet, despite all their efforts, most tombs were eventually robbed. Not by enemies, but sometimes by their own descendants. Generations later, during times of famine or collapse, even once sacred tombs became targets of desperation. Still, the efforts of those long-ago architects endure. Their mazes, their riddles, their traps and secrets. They remain etched into stone, waiting for discovery, admiration, and wonder. As you rest now, let your mind wander into those quiet corridors. Picture the torchlight. Feel the cool air. Hear the silence that no longer hides danger, but instead hums with the echoes of history. Every brick laid by hands long gone. Every turn meant to mislead. Every chamber meant to protect. Sleep in the comfort of knowing that those secrets are no longer hidden for fear or theft, but remembered with respect. Honored with curiosity. Preserved in the soft embrace of history. Let us journey now into the very heart of mystery, a place where curiosity meets reverence, and the silence of ages is broken by the soft, cautious steps of discovery. Across deserts, mountains, and ancient ruins, archaeologists have unsealed tombs whose names would soon echo through the world, not just for their treasures, but for the whispers of curses that followed. Perhaps the most iconic of these is the tomb of Tutankhamun, discovered in 1922 by Howard Carter in the Valley of the Kings. It was a find unlike any other, virtually intact, filled with golden relics, sacred artifacts, and the mummified body of a young king whose rule had been largely forgotten. But it wasn't just the splendor of the tomb that captivated the public. It was what happened next. Soon after its opening, people connected to the excavation began to fall ill, or worse. The most famous was Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's benefactor, who died of blood poisoning just a few months later. Some claimed his dog howled and dropped dead at the same time, thousands of miles away. Others associated with the tomb reportedly died of mysterious causes in the years that followed, strange fevers, sudden infections, and accidents. Newspapers called it the mummy's curse. Though modern scientists largely dismiss the idea of a supernatural curse, pointing instead to mold, bacteria, and coincidence, the legend lingers. And in some quiet corners, people still believe that ancient forces punish those who disturb the boy king's slumber. But Tutankhamun was not alone. In Iran, the so-called salt men were found in the Cherabad salt mine. These were naturally preserved bodies of ancient miners and possibly nobles, dating as far back as 400 BCE. They were found with weapons, jewelry, and even preserved stomach contents. One had a silver dagger, another a leather boot still intact. Though no curses were found inscribed near them, locals long believed the mine was cursed, and many were uneasy when the tombs were opened. In China, the tomb of Lady Dai, or Xin Zui, astonished the world with its preservation. Discovered in the 1970s, her body was so intact that scientists could study her veins, organs, and even perform an autopsy. She had died more than 2,000 years ago. Her tomb included silk garments, lacquered dishes, and a sealed cocoon of clay and charcoal to protect her from decay. While no curse was found, the sheer mystery of how she remained so untouched, despite the passage of time, left many feeling that perhaps something more than science was at play. Then there is the tale of the tomb of the unknown priest in Saqqara, Egypt. When opened in the late 20th century, it revealed murals and inscriptions of rituals lost to time. But what chilled visitors was not the art, it was the atmosphere. The moment the chamber was unsealed, witnesses reported an oppressive heat, an overwhelming scent of decay, and a feeling of being watched. Some workers refused to return. Others claimed to have dreams of shadowy figures in the weeks that followed. In Mesoamerica, tombs of the Maya and Aztec have also fueled stories of curses. The Temple of the Inscriptions in Palenque, housing the remains of Pakal the Great, was hidden beneath layers of stone and scripture for centuries. When finally entered in the 1950s, it revealed not only a royal tomb, but a profound knowledge of astronomy and death rituals. The air inside was said to be heavy with age, and something else, less nameable. In Peru, the Lord of Saipan, uncovered in 1987, was buried in golden armor and exquisite jewelry. His tomb had been undisturbed for over 1,000 years. Yet the villagers who lived nearby had long warned of bad spirits in the area. After the excavation, some reported strange illnesses and nightmares, though none were formally linked to the site. But not all cursed tombs were royal. In England, archaeologists unearthed a simple Saxon burial that appeared at first to be insignificant. But within days, members of the team fell ill with a rare respiratory condition. The soil samples later revealed the presence of long-dormant fungal spores. Was it a curse? Or simply the earth releasing its ancient contents into the modern world? Again and again, we find this pattern. Burial sites opened, treasures found, and then, consequences, real or imagined. Illness. Death. Unrest. It is a pattern so deeply embedded in our collective memory that it becomes difficult to separate myth from reality. What remains clear is this: the act of opening a tomb is not just archaeological. It is emotional, psychological, spiritual. These are not just graves. They are messages from another time, sealed with intention, cloaked in ritual, and meant to remain untouched. To disturb them is to cross a line. And whether you believe in curses or not, that line evokes something powerful. A whisper of warning. A chill in the bones. A moment of pause. Yet for all the fear, these discoveries also bring gifts. Knowledge. Wonder. Awe. And a connection to the past that no living person can give. As you drift now into the warm darkness of rest, imagine standing before one of these tombs. The air is still. The desert wind quiet. The stone door looms ahead, sealed for centuries. Would you open it? Or would you turn away, letting its secrets remain where they belong, wrapped in silence, cradled by the earth, untouched by time? When the seal of a long-forgotten tomb is broken and its contents are revealed to the world, the most immediate reactions often come not from spirits or curses, but from people. Across the centuries, and in various corners of the world, the opening of ancient tombs has not only sparked curiosity, it has stirred fear, outrage, excitement, and even political maneuvering. Let us return once again to 1920s Egypt, where the world was still reeling from the aftermath of the First World War. Empires were shifting, colonialism was evolving, and people everywhere were looking for meaning in a changing world. Into this turbulent time stepped Howard Carter, standing before the sealed door of Tutankhamun's tomb. The reaction to the discovery was swift and enormous. Newspapers around the globe featured the golden boy king on their front pages. Photographs of gilded shrines, funerary masks, and ancient papyri captivated the public. Museums reported record visitors. Children reenacted the tomb's discovery in schoolyards. Jewelry makers released their Egyptian revival pieces, scarabs, ankhs, and Eye of Horus pendants were suddenly in fashion. And yet, beneath the marvel, there was something darker brewing. The death of Lord Carnarvon, followed by reports of other strange misfortunes, gave rise to headlines about a mummy's curse. In Europe and America, readers devoured tales of haunted dig sites and vengeful spirits. Ghost stories blended with real obituaries. Spiritualist movements, already popular at the time, seized on these events as evidence of life beyond the grave, and of ancient powers not yet understood. Public imagination had turned fear into fascination. Not everyone was pleased. In Egypt, some intellectuals and citizens saw the tomb's disturbance not as progress, but as theft. The removal of artifacts to the British Museum and other foreign institutions sparked resentment. Nationalists decried the loss of heritage, framing the curse not as supernatural punishment, but as a symbol of colonial arrogance. In fact, some Egyptian newspapers at the time suggested the curse was a metaphor, a poetic justice for foreigners who disturbed what was sacred. This idea took root and grew. Soon, curses became a rhetorical tool, wielded to evoke dignity and protest. They looted our dead, some said. Let the dead rise. Elsewhere, the concept of the cursed tomb became a marketing strategy. Museums began promoting exhibits as the dangerous or haunted, drawing in visitors eager to feel a chill. Movie studios released films like The Mummy, 1932, where ancient vengeance threatened modern life. Hollywood transformed the fear into spectacle, creating a cultural myth that would last for generations. The same story echoed across other discoveries. In the 1970s, when Chinese archaeologists opened the massive tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, public reaction was mixed. The terracotta army was astonishing, thousands of life-sized clay soldiers, each unique, standing in silent formation. But the emperor's actual burial chamber remained sealed. Legends claimed it contained rivers of mercury and deadly traps. Scientists, cautious of toxic elements, chose to leave it undisturbed. And yet, whispers of curses emerged anyway. Some workers reported feeling ill. Rumors spread that the soil was poisoned. Local villages spoke of ancestral spirits disturbed. The state-controlled media downplayed these rumors, but in hushed corners, they thrived. Even in modern times, fear lingers. In the early 2000s, a team of archaeologists uncovered a sealed sarcophagus in Alexandria. When opened, it was found to contain 3 skeletons floating in reddish liquid. The internet quickly dubbed it the Black Sarcophagus, and social media exploded with jokes and warnings, "Do not drink the cursed juice. This is how the apocalypse begins." While mostly playful, the viral panic showed that the idea of ancient curses still resonates, even in the age of smartphones and satellites. Some governments even leaned into these myths. Tourism boards in Egypt, Mexico, and Peru have occasionally emphasized the mysteries and the danger of ancient tombs in promotional materials. They balance awe with a hint of dread, enough to inspire wonder, but not enough to deter travelers. In other instances, curses were politicized. In the Soviet Union, stories circulated about a team of scientists who had attempted to study ancient Scythian tombs. When several of them died unexpectedly, whispers of curses were used either to sow fear or to discredit enemies. It became difficult to tell where folklore ended and propaganda began. Meanwhile, in local communities, tomb discoveries often triggered spiritual and cultural responses. In parts of India, when burial sites were unearthed, villagers might light lamps, chant prayers, or even refuse to pass near the excavation site. In remote regions of Central Asia, sheep were slaughtered as offerings to keep spirits calm. Sometimes, sites had to be closed, not for scientific reasons, but because of social unrest. This delicate balance between scientific curiosity, cultural memory, and spiritual fear defines our reaction to tombs. There's a reason why archaeologists today work closely with anthropologists, theologians, and local elders. They understand that they're not just entering ancient spaces, they're stepping into stories that are still alive. And yet, humanity cannot resist. The idea that secrets lie buried beneath our feet, that something powerful, beautiful, or terrifying waits in the dark, is too compelling. Every shovel in the soil might unearth not just artifacts, but entire mythologies. So we dig. Carefully. Cautiously. And when the air of a tomb, untouched for centuries, finally rushes out, we hold our breath, not just because of the dust, but because of what it might mean. A whisper from the past. A warning from the dead. Or perhaps, the welcome. The moment the first sealed tombs were broken open, people began to whisper about curses. But as decades passed and science advanced, new voices emerged, those of medical researchers, archaeologists, chemists, and historians, all seeking a more rational explanation for the so-called curse of the pharaohs and other eerie events tied to ancient tombs. Were the ancient warnings, those intricate inscriptions carved into the walls of burial chambers, merely superstitions? Or could there have been something real hidden within them, something misunderstood? Let's return again to the legendary tomb of Tutankhamun, where this question first captivated the modern world. After the sudden death of Lord Carnarvon and a series of other misfortunes among those associated with the excavation, many blamed the curse. But skeptics, intrigued by the pattern of events, began to look deeper. In the years that followed, doctors and scientists proposed several biological and environmental theories to explain the deaths. One leading idea was toxic mold. Sealed tombs, particularly those undisturbed for millennia, provide an ideal environment for the growth of fungi and bacteria, especially on organic materials such as linen, wood, and even human remains. Some molds, like Aspergillus flavus, produce aflatoxins, which are harmful to the liver and immune system. When disturbed, these fungal spores can become airborne, inhaled by unsuspecting archaeologists working in tight, unventilated spaces. In the dim chambers of a tomb, filled with ancient dust and the faint scent of resin, a single deep breath might carry centuries-old pathogens. Another theory focused on bacteria growing on decayed remains and even on the wrappings of mummies. In 1999, German microbiologist Dr. Gotthard Kramer analyzed 40 mummies and found several dangerous species, including Staphylococcus, Pseudomonas, and Klebsiella, some of which can cause severe infections, especially in people with weakened immune systems. So while ancient curses warned of death for those who enter, it might have been a primitive way of acknowledging that these spaces were inherently hazardous. There's also the possibility of radiation and chemicals. The ancient Egyptians were skilled embalmers and often used a mix of resins, natron, a natural salt, bitumen, and sometimes even mercury or lead-based compounds to preserve bodies and ward off insects. Over time, some of these materials degrade into toxic gases or particulates. In rare cases, the radiation from naturally occurring minerals like uranium in stone walls has also been suggested, although evidence remains limited. This brings us to the intersection of belief and biology. Could the power of belief itself play a role in the so-called curse? Modern psychology gives us a resounding yes. The nocebo effect, a counterpart to the placebo effect, occurs when negative expectations cause a person to experience real physical symptoms. If someone believes they are cursed, if they expect misfortune, illness, or even death, their body may respond accordingly. Increased stress, elevated cortisol, and compromised immune function are well-documented responses to fear. Imagine being an archaeologist who has just been told, jokingly or not, that a curse has been placed upon them. Every headache, every missed step, every delay or illness suddenly seems more sinister. A minor infection becomes a dire warning. A coincidence becomes a sign. This psychological weight can be powerful. In one notable case, Egyptologist Arthur Mace, a key member of the Tutankhamun excavation team, fell ill shortly after the tomb was opened. His health deteriorated over several months. Was it mold? Was it exhaustion? Or was it the growing panic caused by the now famous curse headlines? The records do not say for certain. Similarly, another expert, Sir Bruce Ingram, received a gift from Howard Carter, a mummified hand wearing a scarab bracelet inscribed with the ominous words, "Cursed be he who moves my body. To him shall come fire, water, and pestilence." Ingram's house later burned down. Then it flooded. Coincidence? Possibly. But to those living it, such chains of events can feel inescapable. Science also helps explain why so many people survived the opening of tombs. If a curse were real in a supernatural sense, why didn't all the members of Carter's team perish? Many of them lived long, healthy lives. Carter himself lived until 1939. 17 years after the tomb was opened. The fact that a few individuals died prematurely while others did not suggests a mix of environmental risk, personal health, and psychological susceptibility rather than a sweeping metaphysical vengeance. Still, science doesn't dismiss the importance of belief. In fact, it emphasizes that beliefs, cultural, personal, and historical, shape behavior and health in complex ways. When archaeologists open a tomb today, they don't simply bring masks and gloves. They bring cultural sensitivity, psychological training, and interdisciplinary awareness. They collaborate with historians and theologians. They listen to local communities. They understand that disturbing a grave, even in the name of knowledge, is a sacred act that must be approached with reverence. Modern archaeologists also conduct thorough hazard assessments, including air testing and biological sampling, before entering sealed spaces. Medical support is on standby. Safety protocols are robust. The goal is no longer just to recover artifacts, but to ensure that the past is treated with dignity and that the living are kept safe. In many ways, science hasn't killed the mystery of tomb curses. It has deepened it. We now know that the dangers were real, but they were chemical, bacterial, psychological, and social, rather than magical. And yet, the echo of a curse, the sense that the past watches us, that it can push back when disturbed, remains powerful. We are creatures of logic, yes, but also of awe. And that awe whispers, even in the lab, be careful. The past is never truly silent. It begins with a whisper in the dark. A sealed chamber, untouched for millennia, opens to the hiss of shifting air and the flicker of a torchlight. Dust dances in the silence, and the onlookers, scientists, laborious, historians, lean closer, breath held. They've come for knowledge, for legacy, for treasure perhaps. But something else always lingers in those quiet moments. A shadow, a question, an unease. We've spent this entire journey examining that very feeling, the one that drapes itself over the idea of a cursed tomb. From ancient Egyptian warnings carved into limestone to headlines splashed across newspapers in 1923, the idea of a tomb's curse continues to haunt and fascinate. But in this final stretch, let's take a gentle step back and ask, why does it hold us so tightly? Why, even in our modern, scientific age, do so many people still believe in the danger of disturbing the dead? The answer lies not just in superstition or in fear of death, but in something deeper, the quiet reverence we feel for memory, for legacy, and for silence. A tomb is not merely a structure of stone and dust. It is a promise, a sacred agreement between the living and the dead. Leave me undisturbed, it seems to whisper. Let time take me. Do not reach backward into what has been laid to rest. In breaking that promise, even for noble reasons like history and education, we touch something primal, our innate discomfort with disruption. Ancient peoples believed in the power of names, in the sanctity of proper burial, in the soul's journey beyond the grave. Disturbing a body was not just physical, it was spiritual. And though we now frame these acts in a language of science and anthropology, the echoes of that taboo remain. Consider how we treat cemeteries today. Even in the most secular societies, we step lightly through gravestones. We whisper. We show respect. When archaeologists in the modern world unearth a grave, they do so with gloves not only on their hands but upon their intentions. The curse we speak of, then, may not be magic. It may not be smoke or shadow or ancient gods stirring in anger. Instead, it may be the voice of conscience. A whisper reminding us that the dead were once like us, people with stories, fears, and dreams. To awaken them, even in name of curiosity or progress, is to walk a delicate line. And yet, humans are storytellers. We cannot resist peering behind the curtain. We open tombs because they call to us. They hold secrets, glimpses into lives lived in a different world, under different stars. In that act of discovery, we do not only learn about them, we learn about ourselves. Who are we to bury the dead with such reverence? Who are we to unearth them? Across the centuries, each tomb unearthed has told us more than just the name of a king or the contents of a sarcophagus. It has revealed values, beliefs, customs, fears. The way a body is laid to rest says volumes about a civilization's understanding of life and death. In some cultures, death is an end. In others, it is a doorway. And the so-called curses? They remind us that belief is power. That fear and faith can shape reality. A warning on a tomb wall, written thousands of years ago, still sends shivers down the spine of modern readers. Whether the curse works or not is irrelevant. What matters is that it speaks to something eternal within us, the desire to protect the sacred, and the fear of what happens when we fail to. Today, many archaeologists and historians strive to balance curiosity with respect. Local communities are involved in excavations. Reburial efforts are made. Museums increasingly consider the ethics of displaying human remains. There is a growing understanding that the dead are not artifacts, but ancestors. And in honoring them properly, we honor ourselves. Even still, the myth persists. From Hollywood blockbusters to whispered rumors among tour guides in Egypt, cursed tombs remain a fixture in our cultural consciousness. They satisfy our longing for mystery, for danger, for stories with stakes. A tomb that kills? That's unforgettable. It's drama with teeth. But as we settle into sleep tonight, here's a softer thought. Perhaps the true curse of the tomb is the forgetting. That time moves on. That names are erased. That once beloved figures become museum exhibits. That a person who lived, who wept, who dreamed, becomes a curiosity behind glass. And maybe, in that light, those ancient warnings were not threats, but pleas. Remember me. Do not forget that I lived. And we haven't. We've remembered, for thousands of years. We've written their names, rebuilt their stories, whispered them into the future. And in doing so, perhaps we have broken not a curse, but a silence. So the next time you hear of a cursed tomb, think not just of mummies and misfortunes. Think of silence. Think of memory. Think of the people who once walked the earth, just like you. And then, let your thoughts drift like desert wind over sun-baked stone. Let your mind wander down a darkened corridor lit by torchlight. And remember, the past is never truly buried. It only sleeps. And it dreams.